We are terminating you effective immediately. Security will escort you out of the building, Chloe said. She did not even look up from the brand new, company-issued laptop she was still setting up. It was day one for her, office one for me. Her name was Chloe Vance. She was 29, fresh out of an expensive business school, and newly married to the CEO's son. Her father-in-law, Donald Vance, had appointed her chief strategy officer just yesterday. And now, she was using her first official hour to fire me. My name is Edward Miller. I am 58 years old, and my signature is on the very incorporation documents that allowed this building to exist. I did not argue. I did not raise my voice. I simply stood up, adjusted my jacket, and placed my security badge on the desk. Chloe had her resume printed on thick cardstock, her hair in a tight ponytail, and the absolute confidence of someone who had never had to pay for a mistake in her life. She was reading off an iPad, probably a script her husband or Donald had helped her write. I want to make sure we do this by the book, I said. Just tell your father-in-law that the board meeting in 3 hours is going to be very interesting. She scoffed, a tiny dismissive sound. I am the chief strategy officer, Edward. The strategic direction of Vance Logistics does not include you anymore. You can leave now. I walked out of my office, past the junior HR rep who looked like he was about to faint, past the security guard who looked confused because he had known me for 15 years, and past the framed photo of Donald Vance in the lobby. Chloe thought she had just made her first power move. She probably thought she was going to write a post on LinkedIn about making tough choices for the growth of the company. What she did not know was that she had just pulled the pin on a legal grenade, and the timer was already down to 180 minutes. Let me tell you how we got here. 20 years ago, Vance Logistics was not a multi-million-dollar company with a glass tower in Delaware. It was 3 beat-up flatbeds, a leaking metal warehouse, and Donald Vance. Donald was a visionary, the kind of guy who could sell air to a bird. But he was also the kind of guy who forgot to pay payroll taxes and once almost lost our entire fleet because he forgot to renew the vehicle registrations. He needed someone to build the structure. I was that person. I came in, cleaned up the books, set up the operating agreements, and secured our first major shipping contracts. When Donald offered me a vice president title in year 2, I told him no. I did not want a title. I wanted stock. You would rather own the ceiling than sit under it. Donald had joked. Exactly, I told him. By year 5, I owned 15% of the company. By year 10, I was at 38%. When our chief financial officer left after a massive disagreement with Donald over a failed expansion, he wanted to dump his shares fast. I bought them. When Donald's brother tried to drag the company into a messy public lawsuit over family assets, I settled that privately with my own money in exchange for another block of shares. Today, I sit on 72% of Vance Logistics. The records are filed neatly in the Delaware Corporate Registry. I do not have my photo on the company website, and I do not have a fancy bio in the annual report. I wanted leverage, not attention, and tucked inside our amended shareholder agreement was a specific clause. Clause 17C, I wrote it 17 years ago. After an incident where Donald's nephew, during a tantrum, tried to fire our entire logistics team because they would not prioritize his personal delivery, that was when I realized nepotism would eventually destroy what I built if I did not protect it. Clause 17C was simple. Under Delaware General Corporation Law Section 141, the Board of Directors holds the ultimate authority to manage the business. The clause stated that if any non-equity executive, meaning someone who does not own shares, unilaterally terminates a corporate officer without a prior formal board vote, all executive powers of that appointee are suspended immediately. More importantly, all voting control and interim operational authority revert automatically to the majority shareholder. Me, Chloe, was appointed CSO by Donald, but the board had never ratified her position. She owned 0% of the company. She was a non-equity appointee. By signing my termination paper without a board vote, she did not fire me. She triggered a corporate trapdoor that had been waiting for 17 years. I did not wait for her to sign the paper to act. I knew what she was planning 3 days ago when my assistant showed me the meeting schedule. At 7:03 a.m. this morning, hours before I walked into the office, my lawyer, Paul Henderson, had already couriered the Clause 17C activation packet to every board member and investor. Inside that packet was the full equity breakdown, my signed trigger letter, and a copy of the Delaware bylaws. The 3-hour timer for the emergency board meeting had started before Chloe even finished her morning coffee. While I was packing my personal belongings into a cardboard box, Chloe was probably ordering new curtains for my office. She had already updated her Slack status to Chief Strategy Officer, and she was drafting her first company-wide announcement. She had no idea that the system was already starting to reject her. To her, I was just an old employee who had stayed too long. She did not know that you do not delete the person who wrote the code for the database. When I reached the parking lot, I put my box in the trunk of my car. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Paul Henderson, all packets delivered. Donald's lawyer just called. He sounded like he was hyperventilating. Emergency meeting confirmed for 1 p.m. I smiled, got into my car, and drove to a diner down the street. I ordered coffee and a plate of eggs. I had 3 hours to kill, and for the first time in 20 years, I did not have to answer any emails. While I was eating my third slice of bacon, the temperature at the Vance Logistics headquarters was reaching a boiling point. Donald Vance was on hole 7 at the Whispering Pines Country Club, a golf course he half-owned. He was chewing on a premium cigar, adjusting his stance for a birdie putt, when his phone buzzed for the third time. He ignored the first 2 calls, but the third ring came from the personal line of Paul Henderson, the company's general counsel. Donald snapped his phone open with a grunt. "This better be important, Paul," Donald said. "I am in the middle of a backswing." "You need to get back to headquarters right now," Paul said. His voice was unusually flat, devoid of the normal deferential tone he used with Donald. "What is it?" Donald barked. "Did one of our trucks get into an accident?" "No," Paul replied. "Chloe just signed a termination memo." Donald let out a sharp laugh. "Oh, that, yes. She told me she wanted to clean house. Edward has been dead weight for years. It is about time we got some fresh blood in here." Paul paused for a long second. "Donald, she did not just fire Edward. She triggered Clause 17C of the shareholder agreement." Donald's hand froze. The cigar slipped slightly in his teeth. "Clause 17C? We have not looked at that document since 2009. What are you talking about? The emergency board meeting has been called for 1 p.m. today. The packets were delivered to all investors at 7:05 a.m. this morning. You have exactly 90 minutes to get here." Donald did not finish the hole. He did not tip the caddy. He stormed to his SUV and drove back to the office, running 2 yellow lights and nearly hitting a delivery van in the parking lot. When he arrived on the 20th floor, the atmosphere was dead silent. Usually, the receptionist would greet him with a smile, but today she looked down at her desk as if she were trying to disappear. He pushed open the double doors of the main conference room. Paul Henderson was there, along with our chief financial officer and 2 junior analysts. Nobody was drinking coffee. "What is this nonsense about Clause 17C? Donald demanded, throwing his car keys onto the glass table. "Edward is a minority partner. I am the CEO. I can approve any hiring or firing I want." Paul slid a thick leather binder across the table. "Read Section 141 of the Delaware General Corporation Law, Donald. Then read the bylaws we amended in 2009. Donald flipped the binder open, his eyes scanning the highlighted sections. "Chloe Vance was appointed Chief Strategy Officer by you 3 days ago," Paul explained. "But under the bylaws, any C-suite appointment must be ratified by a formal board vote. You never called a vote. That means Chloe is legally classified as a non-equity executive." "So?" Donald muttered. "She is family, so." Paul continued, "Clause 17C states that if a non-equity executive terminates a corporate officer without a board vote, 2 things happen immediately. First, all executive authority granted to that appointee is suspended. Chloe is no longer the CSO." Donald's face began to lose its tan. "And the second thing?" "Second, all voting power and interim operational authority revert automatically to the majority shareholder." Paul looked Donald straight in the eye. "Edward Miller owns 72% of the voting stock. The moment Chloe signed that memo, Edward became the sole decision-maker for the entire transition." Donald slammed his hand on the table. "We will rescind the firing. Call Edward. Tell him it was a mistake. We will give him a bonus." "There is no rescinding," the CFO spoke up, his voice trembling. "The filing was automated. Edward's legal team filed the activation. with the Delaware Corporate Registry at 7:06 a.m., right after the couriers confirmed delivery of the packets to the investors. It is already recorded. Donald ran a hand over his mouth. He looked like he had just walked into a wall. "Where is Chloe?" he asked. "She is in the executive office," the CFO said. "She is currently trying to figure out why her email access is restricted." Upstairs in my former office, Chloe Vance was indeed staring at her monitor with a look of growing frustration. 10 minutes earlier, she had sent a Slack message to Owen Davis, the IT director. "Please deactivate all access for Edward Miller immediately. Full lockout." "Thank you," Chloe had typed. Owen, who had been with Vance Logistics for 12 years, stared at the message on his screen. Then he opened the master database. Right there. On the administrator panel, Edward Miller's name was highlighted in red. He was the primary system administrator. He held the compliance tokens. He had the API keys for the SEC digital filing system. Owen did not reply to Chloe's Slack. Instead, he unplugged his laptop, walked down to the legal department, and set it in front of Paul Henderson. "She wants me to lock Edward out," Owen said. Paul looked at the screen, then at Owen. "If you lock Edward out, the SEC auto-filing system will flag us as non-compliant within 24 hours. The investor portals will shut down because Edward's digital signature is required for the monthly compliance certificates." "Do I do it?" Owen asked. Paul shook his head. "Do not touch his account. Let the system run its course." Back in her office, Chloe decided to ignore the Slack silence. She wanted to post her big update on LinkedIn. She typed out, "Today I made my first difficult decision as CSO. True leadership is about prioritizing the future of the company. A new era begins at Vance Logistics." She hovered her cursor over the published button. Before she clicked, her phone buzzed. It was a text from the lead investor in Boston. "Why is there an emergency board meeting scheduled for 1 p.m.?
Sign.
Chloe's brow furrowed. She typed back, "There must be a mistake. I am just restructuring the team," the investor replied. "Edward Miller just filed a Clause 17C activation. He owns 72% of the company. If this is not resolved in 2 hours, we are pulling our credit line." Chloe's fingers froze over her phone. Her mouth went dry. She looked back at her computer screen. She tried to open the corporate financial dashboard to check the company's liquid cash reserves. The screen flashed. Error 403. Access denied. She tried to approve her own corporate credit card limit increase. Flashed. Transaction rejected. Shareholder authorization required. She tried to send an email to Donald. It bounced back. Address unrecognized. The digital walls of Vance Logistics were closing in on her, and she was starting to realize that the keys she had been handed did not fit any of the locks. By 12:45 p.m., the main boardroom on the 20th floor of Vance Logistics was completely full. This was not a regular meeting. There were no coffee cups, no plates of pastries, and no friendly chatter. Only glasses of ice water that were slowly melting, leaving rings of condensation on the polished mahogany table. The room was cold, both from the air conditioning and from the absolute silence of the 10 board members who sat in their high-backed leather chairs. These were men and women who controlled millions of dollars, and they had spent the last 2 hours canceling flights, rescheduling golf games, and calling their personal lawyers. They were angry, and more importantly, they were terrified of the legal liability they were suddenly facing. At 12:50 p.m., Chloe Vance pushed the double doors open. She was wearing a brand new cream-colored power suit she had bought specifically for her first week on the job. She was still clutching her leather portfolio, her face carrying the same smug, confident expression she had worn all morning. She had spent the last hour convincing herself that the digital lockouts were just IT glitching, and that her father-in-law would easily smooth over any issues with the investors. She walked into the room with a quick, energetic stride, aiming straight for the large leather chair at the head of the table, the seat reserved for the CEO or the presiding officer. "Good afternoon, everyone," Chloe said, offering a bright smile that nobody returned. She went to pull the head chair out, but before she could sit, the board chair, Mr. Reynolds, a 67-year-old investor who had been with the company since its 3rd year, cleared his throat. "You can observe the meeting, Chloe," Mr. Reynolds said, his voice flat and dry as dust. "But that seat is reserved." Chloe paused, her hand still resting on the back of the chair. She laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. Reserved. For whom? Donald is not here yet, and as the CSO, I think it is appropriate for me to lead the briefing on the strategic transition. Paul Henderson, the general counsel, did not look up from the document he was reviewing. Under Clause 17C of the shareholder agreement, your appointment as Chief Strategy Officer has been suspended, effective at 7:06 a.m. this morning, Paul said. Legally speaking, you do not hold that title and you do not have authority to lead any briefing. Chloe's face went from pale to a deep, burning red. That is ridiculous. Donald appointed me. I signed my onboarding paperwork. Donald Vance is the CEO, but he does not own the company, Paul replied, finally looking up. The bylaws require C-suite appointments to be ratified by the board. You were never ratified. Because you own 0% equity, you were classified as a non-equity appointee. Your decision to fire a corporate officer without a board vote was a direct violation of Delaware General Corporation Law, Section 141. It triggered the immediate suspension of all your administrative and operational powers. This is a misunderstanding. Chloe raised her voice, her MBA polish cracking. We can just undo the firing. It was a minor administrative adjustment. It is not minor, Mr. Reynolds said. The Clause 17C activation was filed with the state registry 5 hours ago. The transition is already active, but who filed it? Chloe demanded, looking around the room for support. Her husband, Julian, was sitting at the far end of the table, staring intensely at his shoes, refusing to look at her. Who has the authority to do that? The woman you tried to delete, Mr. Reynolds said simply. Before Chloe could respond, the door handle turned. It was a slow, deliberate sound that drew every eye in the room. The door pushed open, and I walked in. It was exactly 1:00 p.m. I was not carrying a cardboard box anymore. I wore my usual dark charcoal suit, tailored and clean. I walked past Chloe, without glancing at her, went straight to the head of the table, and placed my black leather folder onto the mahogany surface. I did not sit down. I stood at the head of the table, looking at the board members I had known for nearly 2 decades. Thank you for coming on such short notice, I said. Edward, Donald Vance's voice came from the door. Donald had just entered, looking exhausted. His golf cleats were gone, replaced by loafers, but his shirt was wrinkled and his hair was messy. The swaggering CEO, who usually dominated every room, looked like he had aged 5 years in his 20-minute drive. He walked to the empty chair next to mine and slowly sat down. He did not look at Chloe, and he did not look at me. He just stared at the glass pitcher of water in the center of the table. Edward, Donald whispered, his voice barely audible. Can we talk about this? We are talking about it now, Donald, I said. I opened my folder and looked at Mr. Reynolds. As the majority shareholder holding 72% of the voting stock in Vance Logistics, I formally present a motion to rescind all executive and C-suite appointments made within the last 48 hours, pending a full shareholder audit of the company's governance. Mr. Reynolds nodded immediately. Motion received and logged. Paul, do we have the verified registry files? We do, Paul Henderson said, sliding a document to Mr. Reynolds. The Delaware filings are active. Edward Miller's 72% voting control is verified. The motion is legally binding. Chloe stood frozen near the corner of the room, her leather portfolio clutched to her chest like a shield. She looked at Donald, then at Mr. Reynolds, her voice shaking. You are letting him do this, she asked. I am family. You are not shareholding family, Mr. Reynolds said, his voice cold. And right now, your presence here is a liability. He pointed to a small chair in the corner of the room, near the door. If you wish to remain and observe, you will sit there, Mr. Reynolds said. Otherwise, security will escort you to the lobby. Chloe looked at her husband, Julian, one last time. Julian did not move a muscle, slowly, her high heels clicking too loudly in the silent room. Chloe walked to the corner chair and sat down. She did not open her portfolio. She did not say another word. I turned my attention back to the board. Now, I said, let us discuss the reorganization of the executive committee. The voting did not take long. The board members knew the law, and they knew my 72% ownership was absolute. Each board member raised their hand. The motion passed unanimously. Chloe's temporary appointment as CSO was formally annulled, and her authority was stripped. The meeting adjourned, and the boardroom cleared out quickly. Nobody wanted to stick around. The directors scurried out like they were escaping a burning building, avoiding eye contact with Donald and Chloe. Chloe was the first to leave, walking out in a daze, her leather folder still clutched to her chest. Julian followed a few paces behind her, looking like a man who had just realized his wife had destroyed his career. Donald lingered. He sat in his chair, staring at the polished wood table, looking like a deflated balloon. "Can we speak privately, Edward?" he asked, his voice cracking. I nodded, and we walked into a small adjoining room that was usually used for private contract negotiations. I closed the door, and the hum of the building's air conditioning filled the silence. Donald sat down at the small table, looking up at me with tired eyes. I did not sit. "I don't know what to say," Donald said, rubbing his temples. "I never wanted things to get this messy." "You did not think about the mess when you let Chloe walk in here and try to throw me out," I replied, my voice calm and even. "You thought you could run this company like a family grocery store." "It was a mistake," he muttered. "She is young. She was just trying to show initiative. I did it for Julian. I wanted to build a family legacy, Edward. I wanted to leave the company to my son. A legacy is built on competence, Donald. Not birth certificates," I said. "You built this company with my sweat, and then you handed the steering wheel to children who do not even know how the engine works." Donald looked away. "Chloe has a degree from a top business school, and yet in her first 24 hours, she spent $15 of company money on a personal branding consultant," I countered. "She ordered a $12,000 Italian leather couch for her office. She drafted a new mission statement that reads like a horoscope. Meanwhile, our primary shipping lanes in Ohio are facing a compliance bottleneck because she refused to approve the budget for 4 new dispatchers. She is playing corporate executive while the actual business is suffocating." Donald did not answer. "And what about Julian?" I continued. "Your son spent $40,000 on a marketing conference in Miami last month that looked suspiciously like a family vacation." "I have the receipts, Donald. Owen Davis backed up the digital ledgers before Chloe could lock them." Donald ran his hand over his face. He looked incredibly old. "What do you want, Edward?" I opened my folder and pulled out 2 sheets of paper, sliding them across the table, side by side. "You have 2 choices," I said. "On the left is a buyout agreement. I am offering to sell my 72% stake back to the company, but at 10 times the current market valuation. It is a massive price. To pay it, you will have to sell your winter home in Palm Beach, cash out your country club membership, and leverage every single share you have left. You will own Vance Logistics, but it will be a hollowed-out shell with no cash reserves." Donald flinched. "And the right page?" "On the right is a reorganization mandate," I said. "I remain the majority shareholder, and I assume the role of executive chairman. Chloe is terminated immediately. Julian is demoted to a junior logistics clerk in our Delaware warehouse, making $18 an hour, where he will learn how the trucks actually move. Paul Henderson will oversee a complete audit of the last 3 years of financial records. Every expense report signed by you, Julian, or Chloe will be reviewed, and you will remain CEO in name only, with 0 operational authority. You will sign what I tell you to sign." Donald stared at the papers, his jaw clenching. "Julian in the warehouse? He has an MBA. Then he can apply his MBA to optimizing our pallet stacking," I said. "It will be the first useful thing he has done here." Donald looked up, his eyes red. "You would really do this to us? After 20 years of working together?" "I am doing this for the company, Donald. You wanted a family playground. I wanted a logistics empire. I am keeping the empire. You have 24 hours to choose. The formal documents will hit your email at 5:00 p.m. tonight." I turned and walked toward the door. As my hand touched the handle, I stopped and looked back. "One more thing," I said. "When Chloe walked into my office this morning and fired me, she did not make an administrative mistake. She made a choice, and choices have consequences." I opened the door and walked out, leaving Donald alone with the 2 papers. The next morning, the office at Advanced Logistics felt entirely different. It was not louder or quieter, but the thick layer of corporate pretense had been stripped away. At 8:55 a.m., a company-wide email was sent out to all 450 employees. "After 20 years of leadership, Donald Vance is stepping down as Chief Executive Officer to focus on personal health. The board of directors has accepted his resignation." Edward Miller has been appointed executive chairman of the board, effective immediately. The email was simple, brief, and carried no quote from Donald. It did not need to. At 8:57 a.m., Chloe Vance walked into the lobby. She was wearing a muted gray blazer and flat shoes, her face pale and her eyes carrying heavy dark circles. She had spent the night watching her husband pack his bags, realizing their corporate fantasy was over. She walked up to the security turnstile and tapped her ID badge against the scanner. A red light flashed. A sharp double beep echoed through the quiet lobby. She tried again, pressing the plastic card harder against the reader. Red light. Double beep. A security guard, a man named Alan who had worked for us for 10 years, stepped forward from the desk. He was polite, but his stance was firm. "I am sorry, Mrs. Vance," Alan said. "Your access has been deactivated." Chloe stared at him, her mouth opening slightly. "I need to get my things from the 20th floor. I have files in my desk. Your personal belongings have already been boxed and sent to your home address via courier," Alan said, gesturing toward the exit doors. "Your files have been archived by the legal department for audit. I will need you to hand over your company phone and keycard." Chloe stood in the center of the lobby. Under the massive logo of the company, she thought she was going to run. A few employees walked past her, looking straight ahead, refusing to acknowledge her. Slowly, she took her company-issued phone and the keycard out of her purse and placed them on the security desk. She did not argue. Her MBA confidence had completely vanished. Alan nodded, picked up the items, and escorted her to the glass exit doors. As she walked out into the humid morning air, I watched from the window of the 20th floor boardroom. It was 9 Luxir a.m. Inside the boardroom, the new executive committee had already gathered. There were no empty seats. The people at the table were not family members or legacy ladder climbers. They were professional managers, investor appointees, and compliance experts. Legal sat next to compliance. Finance sat next to operations. No motivational posters, no empty titles, no illusions. I entered the room to no fanfare. I walked straight to the head of the table, and this time I sat down in the executive chair. "Let us begin," I said, opening my folder. For the next 2 hours, we ran a surgical audit of the company's operations. Our first action item was to approve the $250,000 budget for the Ohio shipping lanes, immediately resolving the bottleneck Chloe had caused. We then reviewed the marketing budget, eliminating the $40,000 expense Julian had run up in Miami, and flagged it as a personal loan that Julian would have to pay back from his salary. Speaking of Julian, he had started his new shift at 6:00 a.m. today at our Wilmington warehouse. According to the warehouse manager, Julian had arrived in brand new work boots that had never seen dirt, holding a clipboard, looking completely lost. He was currently learning how to operate a pallet jack for $18 an hour. He would be there for a long time. During the meeting, Mr. Reynolds looked at the digital presentation on the wall, which showed our new streamlined corporate structure. "We should print out Clause 17C and frame it in the lobby," Mr. Reynolds joked. I did not laugh, but I nodded once. "Make sure it is visible in the legal department," I said. "It is a good reminder of what keeps this company standing." The meeting ended at 11:30 a.m. on schedule. No applause, no celebratory speeches, just people standing up and going to work. I gathered my folders and walked out of the boardroom. As I passed the IT department, Owen Davis stepped out of his office. He gave me a thumbs up. "Admin rights are fully restored, Edward," Owen said. "The Delaware registry updates are complete, and the investor portals are back online." "Good work, Owen," I said. "Let us make sure we keep the security protocols tight." I walked down the main hallway, passing the wall where the vanity organizational chart used to hang. The large frame with the glossy photos of Donald, Julian, and Chloe had been taken down. Only the metal nails remained in the drywall, a tiny reminder that titles are temporary, but equity is permanent. Finally, I reached the ground floor lobby. The same receptionist, a woman named Sarah, was sitting at the front desk. She looked up and smiled, a genuine smile this time. "Good morning, Mr. Miller," Sarah said. "Good morning, Sarah," I replied, setting my folder down on the marble counter. "I will need a new badge issued," I said. "Of course," she said, reaching for a blank card. "What level of access?" I looked at the glass doors, then back at her. "Preferably something with a gold chip," I said. "The kind that does not expire." She nodded. her fingers typing quickly on her keyboard. I took my new badge, clipped it to my jacket, and walked out of the building. True power does not need a loud title. It does not need a corner office, a fancy LinkedIn post, or a family name on the wall. True power is silent, patient, and written in the fine print of the contracts that everyone else forgets to read until it is too late. If you enjoyed this corporate breakdown, do me a favor. Tap that subscribe button and give this story a like. It helps the team keep exposing the truth behind these glass doors. And remember, before you try to fire the person who built the foundation, you should probably make sure you own the land. See you in the next one.